Here, Heinrich Himmler is talking to a Mennonite doctor, a Russian Mennonite doctor, who was killing handicapped children as a part of the Nazi way of doing things. After the war, this man was executed. His name is Johann Clausen. Okay, when the Nazis realized how valuable these people were, they decided we're going to have to get them out of Russia back into our territory. But to create a territory, they used southern Poland, and they made the native Poles move, emptied the lands in preparation for all these Mennonites that were going to be relocated back to this new land, which is called Warthen land. Okay, we don't know much about Warthen land because it never happened. World War II got over and it never happened. But this is a quote. This comes from European Mennonites in the Holocaust. In Warthen land, it limited membership to those of German nationality, strictly defined in Nazi Germany by blood and Volk, thus excluding Christians of Jewish or Slavic background. Our people, this is hard to believe, our people, together with their spiritual leaders, would participate in the Nazi Party morning celebration, which is a pagan activity on one Sunday per month. Its purpose was to awaken and kindle forever anew the forces of instinct, of emotion, and of the soul, which are vital to the struggle for existence and the bearing of our people and our race for all times. This is a part of development of the super people in Warthen land. It's going to include paganism. And of course, Nazism was already into paganism, and that's why they implemented it here. This is the quote. In such passages, Heidegger calls on students and others to wholly submit to the will of Hitler, who is said to embody the will of the German people. His call demands a referral of one's will, offering it up in service to a greater will. The individual is called upon to authentically will by sacrificing his or her will to the one great will of the state, a will that is unified in the will of his fascist leader, Adolf Hitler. In these statements from Heidegger's political speeches, we find a call not simply to abandon one's will, but to actively defer it to the towering will of the Fuhrer. Do we understand how significant that is? It's not I crucify my will and I just give in to the others. It's I and everybody else in Germany was to change our will to say we will the same things that the Fuhrer does. All of us in Germany are going to will the same thing. He's going to lead our wills and we're going to rally and stand behind him saying the same thing. At one time, both Jews and Mennonites were welcomed by German princes who needed their tax monies. I think I said this the other day. Governments always need men and money. They figured out by now that they're not going to get the men. At least many times. But they knew they could get the money. And so Mennonites and Jews were welcomed by German princes who got their tax money. Both groups aroused popular resentment and persecution because of their economic prosperity. Whenever people prosper, they are envied. Much of that envy in peaceful times is kept down. Nobody talks about it, but it's still there. So what many Mennonites don't realize, that while they are prospering in their financial empires, they are increasingly arousing envy in those who are looking on. In this case, eventually German political correctness showcased the prosperous Mennonites for their honesty and industry while declaring that Jewish prosperity undermined German values. Okay, so now It's not just they prosper and people are envying them, but the government is raising them and showcasing them to the German people. And at the same time they are showcasing them, the Jews that they used to be equal to are put down. Because the Jews are said to be undermining German values. So there's an old saying, you have to get up pretty early to hoodwink a Jew. But if you want to bamboozle a Mennonite, you can't even go to bed the night before. Said of the German Mennonites in the 1930s, this German ethnic mania transformed the public profile of Mennonites. The one-time pesky sect now epitomized Germanness with its steadfast adherence to thrift, sobriety, piety, honesty, and industry. Perhaps the most significant was the Mennonite preservation of racial purity. No other German free church was lauded with such praise, and German Mennonites bask in this praise. Let me unpack that a bit. In Prussia, I said earlier, they were not allowed to marry outside their people. They didn't want to because any children could not be baptized in Mennonite. So unwittingly, by intermarrying with only their own people, they were producing Aryans without even trying. And when the Nazis discovered this, they said, look here, this is how you do it. These people have been doing it. And the Mennonites just stood there, didn't say anything, just bask in the praise, the national praise. Adolf Hitler spoke of Germany as a body with himself as the doctor. He wanted to make Germany healthy by eliminating diseased and unhealthy parts of the body. Early on, this meant killing the disabled. I talked to you about that. But because the Nazis also believed that Jews possessed bad genes, they too came to be portrayed by public health experts and scientists as a threat to racial purity and a healthy nation. Heinrich Himmler said, anti-Semitism is exactly the same as delousing. Getting rid of lice is not a matter of ideology, it's a matter of cleanliness. In just the same way, anti-Semitism for us has not been a question of ideology, but a matter of cleanliness. In interest of cleanliness and purity, Hitler required every German family to document its lineage back five generations and have the family records notarized. Genealogical associations archived and cataloged large volumes of Mennonite ancestral information for determining whom to count as Jewish versus Aryan. As a means of ensuring the collective Aryanness of Germany's Mennonite community, genealogical research was extremely effective. Individual members obligated to fill out racial passports. You carried that on your person to say to anybody who checked you that I am racially pure. We're often able to do so with the help of church archivists and other local genealogists. At least one congregation met to fill out race forms as an official church activity. One participant said, until now, a Mennonite was considered Aryan without question. A single case would ruin our reputation. And so this comes from the Mennonite Quarterly Review. You can go check this out for yourself if you want to. But this is what you're looking for in Aryans. These are Mennonite men from the Danzig area, tested by the racial anthropologist Otto Akel in 1931. The middle man, this man right here, looks like our pastor, Jacob Peters. They have retained this racial look down through to the present time. Right? That's the men, And here's the women, female. That comes from the book Chosen Nation. And here's even more. When Jacob Peters saw these, he said, yep, that's my people. That's what we look like. The racial scientists considered Mennonites to be unusually pure specimens of Aryanism. These three women lived in or near Danzig in 1931. They were integrated into racial studies before Hitler's rise to power. Both males and females were prone to light hair, eyes, and skin. Of all Aryans, Mennonites were the tallest outside of Scandinavia. On the psychological side, Mennonites demonstrated simplicity, orderliness, diligence, integrity, detachment, stamina, but also stubbornness, insularity, and severity. Dutch Mennonites belonged to the Frisian tribe, the oldest and noblest of all Germanic groups, whose racial character could be traced back for millennia. Mennonites, directly because of their Mennonite character, have been phenomenally productive, whether as pioneers of agriculture, as industrialists, as businessmen, or as tradespeople. And I could go down several rabbit trails right here to illustrate that. It's just like, it's unreal how productive, how ingenious these people are. All you got to do is go visit one of the places where they live. And I just recently was up in Lacrete, Alberta. And that was just wilderness about 100 years ago. And now it just cleared, and they're still clearing land up there. 10 to 15,000 people, 90% of them Mennonite. What's no wonder it's prospering? Mennonites got there. Everywhere these people go, they just prosper. But the German Mennonites engaged in anti-Semitic communication, both verbally and in print. They noted that Jews were a part of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and profited financially from World War I. They agreed that violence should not be used against Jews, but that legal restrictions were proper. This attitude was all the Nazis really needed to implement their final solution. The German Mennonites would be passive and silent as the Holocaust happened in their midst. In contrast, the Quakers, corporately and individually, refused to be passive and silent, actively aiding the Jews where and when they could. The Quakers did better than Mennonites. Many Mennonite survivors of the Stalinist terror and anti-Kulak and deportation campaign expressed virulent hatred for both Jews and communists as equivalent equals. That's Russia. Mennonite survivors in Russia felt this way. Jews and communists were equivalent equals, were equivalent evils. Mennonites generally resented, envied, and despised Jews because so many of them seemed to have been found in the ranks of the Soviet secret police and the Communist Party cadre, as well as among the supervisors and managers of collective farms and the local agencies. 40 to 50% of the secret police force were Jewish. And it's these people who would come to them at night with their black ravens and take the Mennonite men away. Two weeks prior to the Bolshevik October Revolution of 1917, Lenin convened a top-secret meeting in St. Petersburg, at which the key leaders of the Bolshevik Party's Central Committee made the fateful decision to seize power in a violent takeover. Of the 12 persons who took part in this decisive gathering, there were 4 Russians, including Lenin, 1 Georgian, Stalin, 1 Pole, Dzerzhinsky, and 6 Jews. Just an evidence of the strong Jewish involvement in communism. And so, why have Jews been so mistreated throughout history? Well, one of them is they're so successful. Wherever they go, they succeed, just like Mennonites. They have been above average in intelligence, and because of that, people are jealous of them. And when people are jealous of them, when they have the chance, they will mistreat them. The wealthy Mennonites in this country today are setting themselves up to be abused. And so looking back through history, some notable Jews of recent times. Albert Einstein was a Jew. We know him as the developer of the theory of relativity. Karl Marx was a Jew. Henry Kissinger, recent Secretary of State, was a Jew. Sigmund Freud, pioneer in psychoanalysis, was a Jew. Jonas Salk developed a polio vaccine. He was a Jew. Mayer Rothschild, financier, was a Jew. And Jared Kushner, son-in-law to President Trump, is a Jew. And that is just a short list. These people are phenomenally smart and able to be involved in top management positions and almost like running things. The Nazis used the cross and the Bible as they did their work. And their work was to crush these Jews and to dehumanize these Jews. And as this happened, since the cross is like a swastika is like a broken cross, the symbols of redemption, the cross and the Bible, were used by their abusers to crush these Jews. So, drowning people abused by the life preserver turn to the safer worlds of agnosticism, atheism, or the vague, pluralistic, feel-good spiritualism, which is the position of most Jews today. When you think of the country of Israel, the nation of Israel, probably most of them are agnostic or atheist. There are some observant Orthodox Jews there. As a result of all that has happened with the Nazis, the Jews have said, there could not have been a God in heaven who allowed this to happen. And so they forsook their Judaism. Probably the only person who had any chance of hampering Hitler was the Pope, who had the ear of 40 million German Catholics, but he barely said a word. When German forces occupied Rome, he opened his sanctuaries to give refuge to many thousands of non-Aryans, but he was committed to neutrality in his search for peace and feared provoking Hitler, so he opened not his mouth. The most harshly persecuted Christian group in Nazi Germany were the Jehovah's Witnesses. Of a population of about 20,000, about half spent some time in concentration camps. At least 1,400 died in the camps, and about 250 were executed for refusing to bear arms. I've already talked about this before, but from 1920 to 1940, 1/3 of all Russian Mennonites were arrested and disappeared. The Watching German Mennonites from Germany said in 1936, the recently resurrected German Reich has become a protective bulwark against the Bolshevik assault. We have remained spared from the horrors suffered by comrades that share our faith and our racial stock in the Soviet Union. Thank God for Adolf Hitler. Joseph Stalin had this principle. Men have problems. Death is a solution to all problems. No man, no problems. You just kill people. And this is the man who killed 20 million of his own people through purges, abuse, and starvation, including many, many Mennonites. But Adolf Hitler was saving the Mennonites in Germany. In 1937, Hitler ordered all German children into the government schools. He said, the youth of today is ever the people of tomorrow. For this reason, we have set before ourselves the task of inoculating our youth with the spirit of this community at a very early age, at an age when human beings are still unperverted and therefore unspoiled. This Reich stands and is building itself up for the future upon its youth. And this new Reich will give its youth to no one, but will itself take youth and give to youth its own education and its own upbringing. Hitler was right about this. He understood the future, and so he concentrated on young people. Here are some more of his quotes. He alone who owns the youth gains the future. I wish we understood that better. How fortunate for leaders that men do not think. And that's why propaganda worked so well. It's always more difficult to fight against faith than against knowledge. Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. It's true. That's what happened. Hitler says, my educational method is hard. The weak must be chiseled away. In my order castles, young people will grow up who will frighten the world. I want a violent, arrogant, unafraid, cruel youth who must be able to suffer pain. Nothing weak or tender must be left in them. Their eyes must bespeak once again the free, magnificent beast of prey. I want my young people strong and beautiful. I shall train them in all kinds of athletics, for I want youth that are athletic. That is first and foremost. Thus I will face the pure and noble raw material. Thus I can create the new. I do not want an intellectual education. With knowledge I will spoil the young. I would vastly prefer them to learn only what they absorb voluntarily as they follow their play instincts. They shall learn to overcome the fear of death through the most arduous test. This is the historic stage of heroic youth. And he put his words to practice. He put his ideas into the Hitler Youth. At first, the Hitler Youth was voluntary. Eventually, at age 14, you had to join the Hitler Youth. And they had a lot of camping, a lot of athletics, and a lot of physical exercise. All right, that's the boys. And here's the girls, the League of German Maidens. This is a picture that's in this book. This is Heinrich Himmler walking down through. He's doing a PR work in Russia. This is not Germany. And he says, I was in the Ukraine, and I looked the people over. Your Mennonites were the best. He said that to Benjamin Unruh. Now, those girls are not wearing head coverings, by the way. Those are nurses' caps. And when Himmler said that about them, they loved him. And that's why this picture, you can see the doctor, Mennonite doctor, and Himmler are having a nice, friendly conversation. These people were on the same page. There's a picture of Hitler on the left and Himmler in the center shaking hands with Hitler. That's during World War II. And this is a picture in Ukraine. The Nazis loved Ukrainian Mennonites. Now, these are Mennonites outside of Germany, but they're creating this Warthenland to bring them to. The Nazis were so good at their propaganda that they knew that the very best propaganda you can use is called movies. And they created a movie especially targeting Mennonites. It's called Red Storm Over the Village or Friesians in Peril. I watched this. It about makes the hair stand up in the back of your head. This was aimed at Russia Mennonites when the Nazis went through. Forget your non-resistance. Get on board with the Third Reich. We're going to take over the world. Forget about your Anabaptist past. John F. Kennedy said, the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, contrived, dishonest, but the myth, persistent, persuasive, and unrealistic. In 1937, Eberhard Arnold's German Hutterite community spoke out against Hitler and what was going on. And when Hitler and the Nazis found this out, they said, get out! And they deported them from Germany. The Mennonites who were still in Germany needed to distance themselves from these Hutterites. And we don't know, we're not connected to these people. They said the Hutterites belong neither to German Mennonite churches nor to any other organization within our Free German Mennonite Church. There's a picture of Adolf Hitler speaking to Danzig Mennonites. My guess is that a number of those people that you see there are Mennonite leaders dressed in Nazi uniforms. In 1938, official church president Friedrich Werner gave orders that on Adolf Hitler's 49th birthday in April, all Protestant pastors must swear an oath of allegiance to the Führer and Reich Chancellor, which is Hitler's two titles. Werner's decree included these words: anyone who refuses to take the oath is to be dismissed. German Christians took the oath immediately with joyful hearts and in obedience to inner command. And once again, the German Mennonite Church said, yes, sir. And they were willing to take the oath. There were a few people who were not duped. You probably heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He decided, he went all over, well, I'll read this. Confessing church pastors, however, felt that they had been ordered to break their ordination vow. The text that accompanied this oath described it as more than a recognition of the duty to be subject to governing authorities. It meant being in the most intimate solidarity with the Third Reich and with the man who created that community and embodies it. And so Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his companions traveled from one pastor's meeting to another to persuade ministers not to take the oath. They had little success with their arguments. The whole matter became one of the most shameful defeats of the confessing church. The nation was solidly behind Adolf Hitler. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, it's like, you can't, he tried, these people won't even listen to reason. So he decided it was his moral duty to do something about this. He needed to help kill Hitler. So he was a part of a plot to put a bomb at a certain place, and Hitler was going to be at a certain meeting and sitting at a certain place, and this bomb was placed there against the table leg, and it was set to go off at a certain time, but right before it went off, Adolf Hitler got up and walked someplace else. Bomb went off, Hitler was hurt, some other people hurt, but Hitler was as mad as 1,000 hornets. He searched and found everybody who was even remotely connected to this and killed them, executed them. Eventually, they found Dietrich Bonhoeffer was connected to this. He was far down the line. 2 weeks before Germany was occupied and delivered and freed by the Allies, the Nazis killed him by hanging. You might find his biography by Eric Metaxas interesting. It's all documented. I admire Dietrich Bonhoeffer's insight. I admire his courage, but I don't believe that his way of dealing with this was according to the kingdom of God. He took things into his hand and tried to play God in this. It's like there are some things we just must let in the hands of God. Here's the oath. Every member of the armed forces, the Nazi military machine, was required to swear this oath. And Mennonites did this. I swear by God this sacred oath that I shall render unconditional obedience to Adolf Hitler, the Führer of the German Reich, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and I shall at all times be prepared as a brave soldier to give my life for this oath. Official German Mennonite publications supported the Third Reich, praised the Nazi armies, rejoiced in their victories, and called for Mennonites to lay down their lives for their friends. With the 1939 reunion of Danzig with Germany, the Prussian Mennonites praised the act as nothing short of the merciful will of God. But in a few short years, the victories crumbled into ashes and bitter tears, and I'll show you more about that later. Right now, at the end of World War II, this is what Danzig looked like. Just bombed out. I have more to say about this later. Until it ceased publication in 1941, the German Mennonite periodical, blah, 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 continued to laud Hitler and his policies, as well as to provide theological and biblical reasons for supporting them. 1941, Hitler says, this is during the war, I can't break the church over my knee. It has to be left to rot like a gangrenous limb. But the healthy youth belong to us. Himmler now says, we shall not rest until we have rooted out Christianity. And yet he's on friendly terms with the Mennonites in Russia. When the Nazis permitted German Mennonites freedom to exist as a church only if they abandoned all critical public commentary, they had no anchor, and they said, yes, sir. So that not one able-minded Mennonite man of draft age in all of Germany refused conscription. Some even joined the notorious SS. And here I need to tell you a story. In this book, there's a picture of a man by the name of Heinrich Wiens. I understand he gave up his membership in the Mennonite church a year before he did this. But part of the Nazis' job was to kill Jews. And he became a part of that. And his job was to go to a Jewish Polish village and get all the Jews to register. They had 1 week from the time they were told to register, and on a certain day, be here at this place with some baggage. You're going to be transported. Well, 1 week later, they were met with trucks. The trucks would haul them out to a field close by. And then the Nazis said, okay, first 25, take off your clothes and get in that truck. It was a gas truck, a mobile killing unit. So they took off their clothes, got in that truck, closed the door, truck drove around the field, turned the gas on. By the time they came back, all of them were dead. And so the living Jews were supposed to take the dead Jews out and throw them in the ditch. Next 25, clothes off, in. And so they did that until all the Jews in that village were killed. And then they would go to the next village, and they'd repeat this over again. And go to the next village until it's over again. This is the man, Heinrich Wiens. And there's his gas truck. That's not his. That's a gas truck, a mobile gas van. That's sitting in a junkyard, by the way. It's a mobile Jewish killing unit. That's after the war, by the way. There's another picture. Does anybody have any idea why they told the Jews to take their clothes off before they got in? Anybody? Exactly. They want to reuse their clothes. And it's harder to take clothes off of dead people than it is to get people who are living to take their clothes off. But it also dehumanized them. You don't take your clothes off in public. But they made them do it at gunpoint. And they serve two purposes at once. You dehumanizing these people, and you get their clothing easily. While the public face of German Mennonites consistently supported the Nazi regime, this was not a result of cold calculation. Neither did it take place in the absence of soul searching. Nevertheless, their faith failed to provide a perspective that transcended the trappings of their culture and their error. Brothers and sisters, the question I'm raising is our faith, is our two-kingdom doctrine providing a perspective that is enabling us to transcend the trappings of our culture in our area? Now I need to tell you a story. This is one of the books that is shown in this. It's called A Place for Ruth. You can buy this book at Christian Life Publications. I don't think there's any here for sale. I gave this presentation in Grantsville, Maryland, and somebody said, you need to go talk to Ruth Yoder. So I went and talked to Ruth Yoder, and she told me this story. These are Ruth Yoder's parents. This is Gerda, her mother, and Johannes, her father, and her father was an SS man. He was a stormtrooper. There they are. Ruth is the one in the top right hand. And you can see the father and the mother, and then Grandma is on that picture. So when Dad is off serving in the SS, Mom is at home trying to keep the family going. And she's being helped by Grandma. Eventually, when the Soviets started pushing the Nazis west, and the Nazis are in retreat, this family was in the Danzig area, up near the Baltic Sea somewhere. And they knew they had to flee. And so she got her children, but not Grandma. Grandma stayed behind. Got on a barge, and she was afraid that she would lose some of her children. So she put a sheet around herself and all her children, so that if one died, they would all die. And this is going to help them live because barges, they do some rocking and bobbing on the water. Sure enough, the barge right beside them hit a mine and was destroyed. But theirs did not, and they actually made it to Denmark. And after the war, you can read this book, read the story in the book, eventually the father found them. But Ruth says of her father, I don't think he was a Christian. But he's a Mennonite. He's a German Mennonite. But she doesn't think he was a Christian. The biggest flaw of the Mennonites was not any immediate error. Instead, it was the natural consequence of years of gradual theological adaptations and compromises to better fit within the German community. The consequences for the German Mennonites of abandoning their New Testament principles was complicity with the Nazi regime and being collaborators in the Jewish Holocaust. Okay, so I've just got to have to tell you this story. You go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and they have a map where the various concentration camps were. And one of those concentration camps is at Stutthof. And you can see in this book, one of those concentration camps was led by a Mennonite. He owned the camp. And he is the one who used these prisoners to do his work at a concentration camp. I think it was the very first camp that was built outside of Germany for this. In early 1945, when the Soviets are pushing the Germans back to Germany again, the Mennonites who lived in West Prussia, where these Reimers were the helpless victims of the advancing Russian army. The general fear of being caught by the invaders led many to flee to the west. Those who remained or waited too long, including Grandma in the picture I just showed you, usually the sick, the young, and the elderly, suffered mightily at the hands of the Russian army. Those Russian soldiers raped every woman they could find. So starvation and rape and bodily injury and torture and deportation to Russia and loss of life were among the horrific events of those days. Congregations and families were torn apart. Most would never see their homeland again. The vibrant communities of Mennonites in West Prussia were utterly destroyed. The most populous place in the world was now completely obliterated. So that, I have a picture I want to show you shortly. Rather than having their insecure fears of being expelled from Germany by the Nazis realized, the Prussian Mennonites found a much worse fate at the hands of the advancing Soviet army. By the summer 1945, the Prussian Mennonites lost their 400-year home in the region. It's a gruesome picture. Those are German officers looking at massacred German civilians. Maybe some of those are Mennonite, I don't know. But this is what it looks like. That's all that's there today. Just graves. It's all gone. After the Nazi atrocities became fully known to the public in 1945, let me pause here to say something. When the Allies came in, they realized the Germans would not believe what they were told. So they forced Germans to walk into the concentration camps to see with their own eyes what had happened under their noses. Some of them said, well, we thought something was going on, but we really didn't know. Some of them said we could smell things, but we didn't know. And some of them, they just couldn't come to terms with this. What they were promised as being the answer for the future was one huge lie. How do you come to terms with that? Well, we'll just let the German people as a whole. I want to focus on German Mennonites. What are they supposed to do when they find themselves battling the demon of their own creation in a stark realization of having compromised their fundamental tenets of faith by their alliances with one of the most evil regimes in human history? How do you come to terms with that? At first, could say anything. It took 50 years before the first official statement was written in 1995. And I will read that to you here shortly. It took 30 years before writings addressing the Nazi past came to be written. For this was a very painful process. And I have some articles in Mennonite Life in my house about this time. But it's like they didn't want to write about it or talk about it. But it took 50 years for the first official statement. And I'll read that to you shortly. Okay, this is in relation to this concentration camp at Stutthof, located east of Danzig, in the midst of Mennonite farmhouses. A large number of smaller camps belonged to this KZ also, and the inhabitants of the area often saw starving prisoners in their striped dress on their way to the places of their forced labor. This is an illustration of Mennonite complicity in the Jewish Holocaust. There it is. That's the office of Mr. Enns, a Mennonite. About 65,000 people died of starvation, overwork, epidemics, brutality, and murder at Stutthof. Excuse me. The two girls that you see there, Elizabeth Becker and Jenny Wanda Barkman, I can't say for sure if they're actual Mennonites, but they have Mennonite names. They were guards, female guards, in their standing trial, and these girls were hung. There's Jenny on the left. No, that's two pictures of her. Same picture, same person. Here's a 97-year-old former secretary of the Stutthof camp, brought to justice in 2021, just 4 years ago, charged with more than 11,412 counts. She's already died now, so she was too weak to stand trial, but she was only brought to justice recently. I don't know if this is a Mennonite. Okay, here's one of the books. This is the story of the Nazism that went to Paraguay. That's all I'll say about that. Here's the picture of Hitler's photograph above the pulpit in Paraguay. So why did the German Mennonites enthusiastically support Adolf Hitler? Number one, he provided religious direction. Number two, he improved the farming economy. Number three, he created a stronger central government. Number four, he worked to destroy communism. Number five, he offered hope to a discouraged Germany. And number 6, he offered a comprehensive solution to German problems. But I don't see anything about the power of God there. These are human answers. And they supported him. We look back at that time in history and are perplexed. Couldn't the German people understand what was happening? Didn't the constant diet of slanted media raise any concerns? Incredibly, few were aware of how their views and values were being shaped because it was accomplished through entertainment. They laughed together at the comedies, cried together through emotional scenes, and rejoiced together when German heroes conquered. These movies were the talk on the streets the next day. They couldn't wait for the next new film. But unknown to the public, they were allowing media to change their views, their values, and the very core of who they were. And we have our version of this today. Here's the statement that I referenced earlier in 1995. Most Mennonites in Germany gave in to the temptations of Nazism and sacrificed the peace witness. Very often they valued their commitment to the state higher than their duties to Mennonite brothers and sisters in the Netherlands and France. Pause. What I didn't tell you was that Mennonites in Germany and France, who were enemies of Nazism, actually fought Mennonite Germans. And there's a story of a French Mennonite soldier guarding a German Mennonite. So not only do we have this Nazi story, we have actual Mennonite fighting Mennonite on the battlefield as well. Nearly all Mennonites remain silent in the face of Nazi crimes against Jews and others. We can only plead for forgiveness with the words of the Lord's Prayer. That's 30 years ago. Only 30 years ago. This is a July 2011 statement from the Mennonite magazine. I won't read it to you. This story is just now beginning to be discussed. It's coming out, and that's why these recent books, European Mennonites and the Holocaust and The Chosen Nation, are now out. It's coming to light, and Mennonites are struggling to know what to do with it. In 2001, only 24 years ago, and by the way, these Mennonites are dying off. They're too old. You can't live forever. But this is said of a former Mennonite Nazi in 2001. The majority of German Mennonites have not recognized the need for repentance of any kind. I was told that in Paraguay to this day, Hitler is still admired. The Mennonite open-mindedness toward the Third Reich was possible when Mennonites left the early separation and integrated into a Protestant society. And this pattern has not changed since 1945. In other words, the German Mennonites, even though they now recognize the terribleness of the Nazi regime, have not returned to their Anabaptist roots and the values that they stood for. So why did the German Mennonites become Nazi? They were the heirs of groups who, after long centuries of being disadvantaged, had now made tremendous gains and had flourished quickly after adapting to German society. They had long since lost any connection to the critical stance of the first Anabaptists, and their understanding of their own history was revisionist. They adopted the predominant Protestant theology of Lutheranism, according to which the head of state is acting as God's instrument, although there was also some dissent. In general, however, German Mennonites of this time separated their personal religious beliefs from their political opinions. They were into dualism, and it was okay. There is no denying that Hitler and Stalin are alive today. Now, this is metaphorically. They are waiting for us to forget, because that's what makes possible the resurrection of these monsters. This is by Simon Wiesenthal, who is known as the Nazi hunter after World War II. He's the one who wrote the book, The Sunflower. Non-cooperation with evil is every bit a moral obligation as cooperation with good. Evil prospers when good men do nothing about it. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast and our eternal home. And all we say is, help us, Lord. We need your help and intervention now in 2025. We're heading down the same road.